Hey guys, it's the Metal Blade 5. So after 7 years of high anticipation, we got the next mainline Pokemon remakes with Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. And to cut to the chase, they weren't quite to the standard I'd hoped they'd be. Everyone else has discussed their thoughts on these remakes already, but I wanted to throw my hat into the ring as well, since upon learning how exactly they turned out at the time of their release, I haven't been able to not ponder on how I think they could have been a lot better. I wanted Gen 4 remakes for a long time, probably ever since it was realistic to see one announced. Pearl was my very first Pokemon game, so I have a lot of nostalgic attachment to this generation, and seeing what they were able to do in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire for Hoenn, it got me excited to imagine how they could use that formula for Sinnoh, but with even greater updates and improvements. So I was fully on board the Sinnoh confirmed hype train of speculation over the last few years, and especially once the rumors and supposed leaks claiming Diamond and Pearl remakes were on their way started popping up. But it wasn't more about some reservations by that point due to the shortcomings of Sword and Shield. I honestly enjoyed Sword and Shield from a purely gameplay standpoint, but I also thought they weren't as good as what they could have been considering the jump to the Switch. And I was worried Gen 4 remakes would end up like that too. Then when it came to Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl's announcement, I was left with more concerns than excitement, which mostly persisted up to release when I learned that almost every single concern I had for these games ended up being true. So in a move that would surprise my past self from when I got on the train, I chose not to get them. This is the first time I skipped a mainline Pokemon game after Ultra Sun and Moon, and that was partly due to suffering from troubles in my personal well-being at the time. In this case, it was my own fully uninfluenced decision to not get them, simply because I wasn't satisfied with how they turned out. This is going to be a very subjective video. If you like these games, then that's absolutely fine, more power to you. This video isn't intended to shit on anyone who likes them or their opinions. It's purely presenting all the ways in which I think these games could have been a lot better and a step up from past remakes. I imagine there's plenty of people thinking, you have no right to criticize these games without having played them. And to that I say what I just said before. Almost every single concern I had for these games ended up being true. If that wasn't the case, then I most likely would have bought it, and it means I'm fully aware of the game's content to form at least a decently informed opinion on them. There's also that toxic faction of the Pokemon fanbase that harasses anybody who makes even the slightest criticism towards the series and present often questionable at best excuses in an attempt to invalidate said criticisms, kinda like Smash Bros, SMG4 and Viz Media simps. But I'm only criticizing because I want them to improve for the future, so we don't get a repeat of this whenever they inevitably decide to remake Black and White. This isn't simply a, "Wah, it's not what I wanted" sort of thing, since that faction can't tell the difference between that and genuine disappointment from feeling, once again, that it could have been better. So here are the missed opportunities I found with Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. Getting the most divisive and purely subjective point out of the way first is the art style. I'm personally on the side that doesn't like the game's look. Again, more power to you if you like it, but it just rubs me the wrong way. Everybody says it keeps the chibi look of the originals, but I never really saw them as a chibi art style and felt it looked more that way because the camera was in a bird's eye view. Almost every other 2D game with a camera positioning like that has the characters appear in a similar fashion, such as the early Final Fantasies. So I feel like Ilka, Game Freak, or whoever's decision it was to go with this look misinterpreted how the original games were presented. I don't find that look to translate well into 3D. More specifically, when the camera isn't in that bird's eye view, and especially during moments that are supposed to be taken seriously, but everybody lost a super mushroom. I find that it makes all the character models look weird. Meanwhile, whenever you enter a battle, it then switches to everybody having more humanly proportioned models, and it makes me wish that was how the game looked all the time. It's like a cross between the looks they use in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire and Sword and Shield, but with better lighting and graphics. Which is how I, and I imagine most other people, ideally envisioned how they would look. After the announcement trailer, there were people who reimagined these games without the chibi art style, which had me further wishing that was the approach they went with. Granted, those are fan-made works, but the feeling was still there. Regardless of your opinion on the art style, I think we can all agree that it was jarring to see at first due to the sudden and huge shift from how the other 3D games looked. And I think that may have been partly due to another major factor in these remakes. The biggest concern I got from the announcement was this statement.
These are faithful remakes of the Pokemon Diamond version and Pokemon Pearl version games.
Faithful remakes of Diamond and Pearl. This made me worried that the remakes were going to be so faithful to Diamond and Pearl that they'd also be faithful to all the flaws of those games that were improved upon in Platinum. While Diamond and Pearl weren't bad games, playing those games and then playing Platinum is almost like going from Justice League to the Snyder Cut. Platinum is by far the definitive Gen 4 game due to the numerous improvements, updates, and additions it made. It is better in every single way. So having a remake that focuses solely on Diamond and Pearl and ignoring everything in Platinum would be a huge downgrade. At the time I thought, if that is the case, then what would be the point in playing this when I could just play Platinum again and have a better experience? And well, that fear pretty much became a reality. There is some Platinum content here, but it's mostly aesthetic stuff or limited to the post-game, and is far outnumbered by the things that were only in Diamond and Pearl, which Platinum changed for the better. The biggest one, to a degree, being the Pokemon that are available. Platinum added 59 Pokemon to the base game Pokédex. Not only is this better simply for giving the player access to more Pokemon to catch and use before the post-game, but also for how it impacted the rest of the gameplay. Diamond and Pearl's base Pokédex was pretty limited in the sense that some types were so few in number. Most famous being how there were only 2 Fire-type evolutionary lines, one of which being a starter, meaning you had to pick Chimchar at the beginning, otherwise you'd never be able to get them anywhere else besides trading. This in turn also affected the trainers and especially the bosses who are supposed to use those types. To use the Fire-type example again, we have Flint, a member of the Elite Four who specializes in Fire types, yet 3 of the 5 Pokemon on his team are not Fire types. Additionally, one of the main draws of Gen 4 was how it introduced many new evolved and pre-evolved forms to older Pokemon, which I really like retroactively because it breathed new life into those Pokemon. However, in Diamond and Pearl, almost all of those evolved forms weren't available until the post-game, which really dampened your appreciation of those evolutions until it was too late for them to make a huge impact. Platinum changed all that by bringing in more Pokemon from previous generations and those previously post-game exclusive evolutions into the base game, in turn benefiting all your opponents by giving them access to those Pokemon as well, in which those bosses got teams fully composed of their specialized type. Even ignoring the type aspect, when I first played Platinum as a kid, I felt that these were the teams they should have had in the first place, since they fit them and demonstrate this generation's roster so much better. But since Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl are faithful to just Diamond and Pearl, those 59 additions are wiped from all roots in the base game, and we're back to the weird teams like Flint's mostly non-fire type team, Volkner's half non-electric team, and Candace using a Medicham for some reason. I remember in the past seeing some people who kind of like it when they don't use the same type across their team, since they don't have a recurring weakness. But personally, it always really bothers me when I see them say they specialize in a certain type of Pokemon, only for them to use a bunch of Pokemon that aren't that type. Fortunately for us, thanks to the reworking of the Underground into the Grand Underground, where we can now catch Pokemon there too, they included the Platinum Dex editions here. I really like most of the changes they made to the Underground, and this one in particular did, for a brief period, raise my hopes for the remakes a bit, as this is one of the 2 features in these games that really embraced Platinum's changes. But while we still have access to Platinum's base decks minus legendaries, like I just touched on, that doesn't apply to everyone else, and they can't be found on the surface until you get the Poké Radar, which you don't get until the post-game. These Pokemon aren't even included in your Pokedex until you get the National Dex in the post-game, making them feel incredibly disconnected to everything else until that point. It's better than nothing, but I really think they should have been available the same way they were in Platinum, and thus giving the trainers their Platinum teams too. The wild Pokemon found in the Grand Underground also relate to something else I want to touch on. One of the things about the previous remakes that I really liked was how you could use Pokemon that didn't exist yet when the original games came out, including a few that you could get in the base game, which was a nice way of making things feel fresh and giving the player more options. So I would have greatly appreciated it if that was possible in Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl too. For example, the Eevee you're given in Hearthome City could potentially be evolved into Sylveon if you wanted to. And if we could have gotten the Reggie event battles the way they were in Platinum, we could have had additional ruins for Regieleki and Regidrago and tied them with having to get Regigigas too. Then I would have had the Grand Underground be the place to find special Pokemon that weren't available even in Platinum, which would primarily be composed of Pokemon from later generations. Also, though this would more likely be done through post-game trades if this was included, finding the means to get Alolan and Galarian forms, as well as access to Galarian form evolutions, since that would have expanded the Pokedex, give the player more options, and add a feeling of freshness without being intrusive on the rest of the base game. Ironically, being faithful without reverting back to the weaker experience. But with the method of faithfulness they took, and likely combined with the Dexit approach since Sword and Shield, this didn't happen. Even Pokemon like Sylveon aren't available at all, and that Eevee giveaway is limited to the post-game, just like it was in Diamond and Pearl specifically. But the improvements Platinum made in gameplay didn't stop at just adding more Pokemon and changing opponents' teams, obviously. For the most part, Platinum was also a more challenging game. A bunch of the bosses, namely most of the gym leaders, got slight level increases on their Pokemon, and even though there were a few with next to no change in levels, or those whose levels were lowered in the case of the Elite Four and Cynthia, most of all the boss's Pokemon were given altered movesets that generally were a lot better and made them much more of a threat. The only clear loser from these changes I can think of, aside from maybe Volkner being a pushover if you have a ground type, is Cynthia. Mainly because they replaced her Gastrodon with a Togekiss in Platinum, which gave her team more shared weaknesses. But that was almost definitely done to intentionally make her a bit easier because she was so fucking hard before. Meanwhile, Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl gave them all the exact same levels from the original Diamond and Pearl, which is a good thing for the Pokemon League, but makes the rest of the game pretty easy. Even easier with the experience share on everybody. And while they all got moveset changes too, so again, better than nothing, none of them scream out that they are any better than they were in the originals. In fact, I think a few got severely weakened from their new movesets. Like, they gave Gardenia's Rose Rage Petal Blizzard instead of Magical Leaf, which, while being a stronger move, is physical when Rose Rage has a much higher special attack stat, so it's really a nerf. To also go back to the weird non-specialized type teams as well, I think these remakes should have had the same team compositions as Platinum for the bosses, only going back to Diamond and Pearl levels for the Elite Four and Cynthia when they were higher, probably boosting all trainers' levels even more to compensate for the experience share if we really have to use it, and having a few slight tweaks to movesets here and there purely for buffing purposes. The only big changes I would suggest beyond that are arguably letting Cynthia keep her Gastrodon to retain the greater challenge from the originals, and if we were to go back to Fantina being the 5th gym leader, even with this approach, greatly increasing your team's levels, evolutionary stages, and moves to match that, but still staying true to our Platinum setup. Since I'm already talking about the gym leaders more in depth, and because I have nowhere else to bring this up, use the Platinum gym designs too. I think almost all the gym redesigns in Platinum were way better than their originals, so I prefer those over the remakes using the less interesting and sometimes downright annoying ones from the originals. Only difference in my vision being, again, changing Fantina's gym puzzle to be more challenging if we were to keep her as the 5th leader. A similar sentiment can be said on my feelings towards the post-game beyond what I've already covered. I'd say this is the part of the remakes I found the least issue with, mainly because it's where most of the Platinum content that did get included is located, but I still found it lacking compared to what we could have had instead. Most apparent is how we only have the battle tower in the fight area, as that was the case in Diamond and Pearl, as opposed to Platinum having an entire battle frontier with 4 additional facilities, each with their own rules and frontier brains. As for the survival area, while I love that the gym leader rematches were featured, the other battles that took place here in Platinum sadly weren't. We don't get the weekend battles against Barry, nor the battles against the stat trainers, which gave them more to do beyond being, for all intents and purposes, random people you worked with for a bit before vanishing forever. They do appear in the battle tower here, but I wish they weren't tied solely to that mode. Stuff like this is simply more things for the player to do after finishing the game, thus keeping them engaged, as I certainly was, since Platinum is the Pokemon game I put the most time into, with this being a big contributing factor. And Platinum's improvements extended beyond gameplay too. Even the story was made better. Cyrus's writing and motivations were greatly expanded upon to flesh out both his character and his plan of wanting to destroy the universe and replace it with a new one free of emotions and strife that he deems perfect, to make him one of the series' best antagonists. Whereas in Diamond and Pearl, they only really covered his plan and motive on a fundamental level, which made him come off as a much more generic villain. And cause these remakes are faithful to Diamond and Pearl, that's the interpretation of Cyrus we got. There's also the effective removal of the distortion world. It's still technically here, but it's just one room in Raminus Park where you can battle Giratina in its origin form, as opposed to being a full dungeon with story significance and a story-related battle against Giratina. This is the other aspect of the remakes that really embrace Platinum, yet it's more of a wink and a nudge to people who played Platinum rather than doing anything meaningful. I get them not using the distortion world for the spear pillar part of the story, since they wanted it to focus on catching Dialga or Palkia depending on the version, as they're the mascots here, whilst Giratina was Platinum's mascot. Past remakes did the same thing, so I'm not going to fault them on this. But they still could have included the distortion world and Giratina in a meaningful and plot important way, potentially being even better than in Platinum. And to that, I'll point you over to Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire's Delta episode. This was a post-game storyline loosely based on the story elements of Emerald, the third game in Gen 3, as it was based around Rayquaza and the Sky Pillar, but fleshed out way more to make it its own fresh epilogue story that was well received. From all the way back in the speculation stage of Gen 4 remakes, I imagined them having what I refer to as a distortion episode, where it would do what the Delta episode did, but for Platinum. After you catch Dialga or Palkia and defeat Cyrus, a portal opens in which a shadowy Giratina flies out and drags him inside, which has left an open plot thread for the rest of the base game. Then after you become the champion and start the game again, you hear legends of an alternate world while Team Galactic are desperately trying to operate without their leader. You could have Looker as your guide throughout this episode, or possibly a brand new character akin to Zinnia who has some connection to the distortion world. You come into conflict with Team Galactic and their commanders again as you try investigating these legends, which leads to learning of the distortion world and a sequence of events where you return to Spear Pillar and open that portal back up. You travel through the full distortion world like in Platinum, encounter Cyrus again, and do the final battle against him from Platinum, but with his team being higher level than Cynthia's, defeat him, and then battle Origin Form Giratina. Afterwards, a portal back to the real world opens up, as Cyrus chooses to stay behind since this world is the exact kind he idealized. Ending the episode where you get an attempt to recatch Giratina and turn back Cave if you fucked up before, and get the Greasius Orb there too to switch it back to its origin form. That's just a very abridged version of my idea. Ideally, with good writing, it could live up to the standards of the Delta episode, possibly surpassing it. And the events here could also play into the post-game encounters with Team Galactic at Stark Mountain, where they try to find a way to bring Cyrus back to flesh out that plot point as well. I can't think of any good reason why they excluded all this stuff from Platinum, given they were substantial improvements. And it's not like the past remakes have done this either, since we've gotten things like the aforementioned Delta episode, and Heart Gold and Soul Silver including content from Crystal too. In both those sets of remakes, they honored many of the additions their third games made, and felt like they used those third games as the foundations for the remakes to at least some extent. And even when they went back to things the first two did, those otherwise removed things were sometimes implemented in other ways. Plus, the things that were fully removed were often not massive improvements like in Platinum. Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl should have done the same thing. Specifically using Platinum as the groundwork for everything in this remake, and only notably reverting back to Diamond and Pearl for major things like version exclusives due to having two versions now, and facing Dialga or Palkia at Spear Pillar during the story, along with all the other possibilities I mentioned before. Then just build on that with proper changes and new improvements like what they've already done with these games and even more. And the last thing I wanted to cover, although to be honest, this wasn't something that really bothered me per se. I didn't think about this myself until seeing people discuss it elsewhere, but once I realized it, I started to lean towards those same feelings. Unlike the previous remakes, which gave all the characters updated designs, here they reused their exact same looks from the originals, just with a one-to-one translation from 2D to 3D. I guess I wasn't bothered by this at first because I've been so used to these designs for the past 15 years, but after seeing a bunch of fan-made redesigns and really liking most of them, I now wish they had done this. Again, this is fan art, but it doesn't nullify the argument I'm trying to make that this is something they could have done. Nowadays, the original designs probably look a bit basic compared to what they've done since, so I think an updated look would have really helped here. That is every noteworthy missed opportunity I can think of for the remakes. So just to recap all the updates, additions, and features that I would have included for these games on screen, plus several smaller ones that I didn't have a way to explicitly mention earlier. And these are all things that I think are in the area of being realistic requests. If I could do anything, I would have also had things like Mega Evolution, since there are still some Pokemon who I think deserve one after all these years, but I knew that wasn't going to happen. While Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl certainly have improvements over the originals with good changes that take a step forward, their faithfulness towards the originals to the point of keeping all the weaker aspects in other areas that were respectively fixed and exceeded in Platinum meant they also took a number of steps back from the definitive Gen 4 experience. If Platinum didn't exist, I wouldn't be here and instead be playing them since I wouldn't have that as a comparison. But the fact that it does exist and was largely ignored for something that should ideally be an improvement of the original games, and I mean Gen 4 as a whole in this instance, doesn't make any sense. On top of the missed opportunities elsewhere, this is the abbreviated reason why I found the look of these remakes to be so underwhelming and thus chose not to purchase them, leaving me disappointed in the end. This is pure speculation on my part, but I wouldn't be surprised if these games were affected by the development of Legends Arceus. I think Game Freak primarily wanted to make that game, in part to meet the fan demand of wanting a Breath of the Wild style Pokemon game, but still wanted to release a Diamond and Pearl remake to meet some kind of quota despite not having the manpower and resources to do both. So they handed off development to another company, with the main instruction being to make a Diamond and Pearl remake that they may have taken too close to heart, whilst those overseeing the development just went along with it instead of course correcting and steering them along a better path. And this is going to be an unpopular opinion, but I'm like the one person on the planet who isn't remotely interested in Legends Arceus. Nothing they've shown in the marketing has really resonated with me, and I fear the missions will get very repetitive very quickly. While there's a new approach for the series that is at the very least a good idea on paper, I honestly would have much preferred better Diamond and Pearl remakes. Though even if Game Freak did develop these games, I doubt it'll be much, if any, better given their recent product quality. So from this point, all I can do is wait for whenever the next mainline game or remake is announced and hope they're a universal step forward from what's come as of late, while I stay depressed knowing the dream is dead.
What a baby.